Joining us now, a member of the starting offensive line of a team that cruises into its bye week with an 8-2 record. He is tackle Braden Smith. Braden, welcome to the program. How are you, pal?
Thanks for having me.
So what do you do? What's the number one thing you do on your bye week?
I mean, really right now, it's just kind of having a taste of what it's like to, just be a regular human being again, just hanging out with my son, hanging out with my wife. And, there's always that to-do list at home to get done before I go back to playing again.
I guess the goal is to be home just long enough that when it's time to go back to playing, it's like, okay, good, I'm ready. I did everything I could do, and now it's time to get back to work.
Oh, yeah, definitely refreshed, and then, you're right back to it.
Well, I wanted to talk to you today for a very important reason, but I can't not ask you just a couple of Colts questions, because you guys are one of the best teams right now in the NFL, and you just won a game in overtime in Germany. I'm curious, what was the biggest takeaway you had from that overall experience playing a game in Berlin for the first time ever?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that stadium has a lot of history, so I mean, pretty cool just to be out there and just playing, and the fans are super excited just to have us out there. But I mean, anytime you get to go overseas and play in front of a crowd that they're not necessarily super familiar with football, but just the energy out there is really kind of a special thing to do. And obviously we got the win out there, so that was big for us. And just have that appreciation for the fans all over the world. And, obviously it was a good game out there, overtime. So they were excited about it, and, just grateful to be able to play in front of a crowd in a stadium like that.
Do you sense a different level of excitement in a place like that, even though they may not have the same knowledge, just the overall anticipation and happiness that they get to witness American football in person?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously there's a lot of different, fan bases out there, and I don't know if they really chose a side either or, but at the same time, they're just excited to be able to watch, American football. And, they're just, it's not too many opportunities that they get to see, maybe a team they do root for in their country live. So, I mean, that's a pretty special thing to do.
You were a second-round pick back in 2018, 104 career appearances, 102 starts in the regular season. You've been there for the entire quarterback roller coaster. What's different this year, and do you feel like the position is finally stabilized?
Yeah, definitely over the years, it's been a lot. I mean, obviously the Andrew Luck retirement was kind of a surprise for everybody. But, yeah, I mean, obviously we've had a new quarterback every year. And, with Daniel, we definitely have like that stability. And, he's just a guy that comes to work every day, no ego. And, he just puts in the work. And he's a really fun guy to, protect and play with. And, just grateful for that. And obviously, I mean, he's proven that he's a great competitor and, great quarterback. And yeah, just looking forward to what the rest of the season holds. But, Daniel's just one of those guys I trust, and I know the whole team trusts, and, we all rally around him.
Overall, big picture, what's the biggest difference between this year's Colts team and the past Colts teams you've been on?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this a lot, but there's really just no ego, and I really just feel like everyone's bought in. And you know, I don't think anyone really had much expectations for us coming into the season. So it's really just like, hey, let's just go out there, just ball out, and let's see what happens. But yeah, just the lack of ego, and everyone's just humble. Everyone's going to work each and every day, and I think that's been putting us in a really good spot.
What was the reaction within the locker room to the Sauce Gardner trade? And give me an idea of how that all just started to ripple through the team, that they're making a big swing to bring in this top shelf player to help the team be a lot better both now and in the future.
Yeah, I think that just kind of demonstrates the confidence that, obviously the front office has in us. Obviously whenever, you give up 2 first-round picks, I mean, that's a pretty hefty price. So, I mean, that kind of shows that level of confidence that they have in us. And, bringing in a player like sauce is amazing. I'm obviously his performance speaks volumes for him over the years, and excited to have a guy like that in the locker room, and you know, just yeah, I mean, just going out there now and just playing ball and just knowing what's in front of us now.
You landed on my radar screen over the weekend when I heard from your agent, Michael Parrott, in response to some things I had written and said in the aftermath of last week's tragedy involving Cowboys defensive end Marshawn Nealand. And I said, as I was talking to Michael, that I need to talk to Braden. I want to interview Braden. I want Braden to help make sure people understand not just what you guys deal with and the stresses of being an NFL player, but for the players out there who may need help at some point, how to go about getting it. And I want to start there. And I applaud you for being as open about your own struggles. We all have issues at some time in our lives, and it's always hard to talk about them to anyone. And I was very impressed with the article that you did in the Indianapolis Star. I think things like that help people. When people in prominent positions open up, others, I think and hope, are inspired to do the same thing and get help in their own lives. But I want to start at the very beginning. And for any player out there who currently is going through anything at all that he thinks may require some sort of assistance, what resources are available? And treat this as if you're speaking to a player on some other team right now who knows something's not right and he wants to talk to somebody and he doesn't know what to do. What would be available to him?
Yeah, I think the NFLPA obviously has a lot of resources available, and I know they have like certain contacts they can reach out to speak to someone about, getting help. But I think first and foremost, just speaking to anyone that's close to you, whether, maybe it's a teammate, a parent, a loved one. I think that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest start. And that's kind of where it started for me, especially, is just like getting it out in the open, because if we keep it in, if we keep it locked down, it's hard to have any healing in that sense. So we need to be able to just talk about it. And nowadays, obviously, like, there's obviously that stigma that people don't want to talk about these things because there might be that worry that people think that there's something wrong with me, or this might jeopardize my standings with maybe, in a job or such. So I think the biggest thing is just talking to someone to start off with, and just knowing, that each team has, licensed clinicians. And obviously, like, we're working on some certain things too now to expand those resources and having some more resources readily available for teams. But definitely there's a lot of resources, and I encourage everyone to kind of explore what those resources are through their NFLPA rep, and just kind of going from there, but just talking about it to whatever you got going on to anyone.
And Mike Vrabel, the Patriots coach, had some great comments last week about how important it is for the members of a team to be paying attention to those players who may not be willing to say anything. But if you notice a difference in someone that you know well, someone whose facial expressions you can read, somebody whose words you interpret, if something seems off, it's important for the teammates to be able and willing and comfortable to just pull the guy aside and say, if there's something you need to talk about, I'm here to help you. That network, that community of a locker room is so important in that regard.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and that kind of goes back to like the people closest to you. I mean, they'll be able to tell when something's off. And, and this kind of speaking from my wife's perspective, obviously she knew something was very wrong, because obviously, I wasn't acting normal. Even my teammates, like, I wasn't going about my day in the normal way. And, little things here and there. And a lot of the stuff that I was going through was just all mental for the most part. Not a lot of stuff you could really see me physically doing. Like, obviously I was diagnosed with OCD, and for me, that's all mental compulsions, mental obsessions. And yeah, it took a toll on me. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety and depression, and just, it completely like took the life out of me. I mean, you could tell even my performance on the field, like it wasn't the same. I wasn't the same person. I wasn't having fun playing football. I wasn't having fun, just being a father or a husband because I was so, you know, consumed by what was going on with me and with my mental state that it was really hard. But yeah, I mean, just having people always keeping in, noticing these things that are going on and people closest to you and just never being afraid to talk to the person closest to you about what they got going on. Because I mean, sometimes it's their way of asking for help when they don't know how to ask for help because sometimes they won't always vocalize it. So just being able to talk to a guy and really just seeing how he's doing and trying to get to the bottom of it. And, hopefully those people will start to open up. But it's giving those people more opportunities just to be able to talk about what they have going on, I think is very crucial.
And Braden, you mentioned your efforts to expand the resources. And from my perspective, ideally, it would be to the point where it's as simple as picking up your phone and pressing one of the icons and being connected to someone who can help. And I know the NFLPA has resources available, and they've briefed me on the various things that are out there. Tell us about some of the things that you've been doing to try to make it easier, to make it more efficient, so a player who doesn't know where to turn and isn't comfortable opening up to someone can access a resource set up by the union quickly and easily.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of discussions, me and my wife, this summer with the PA. And some of the things that we were really just talking about were having representatives for each team through the NFLPA, because obviously each team has a licensed clinician. But, during so kind of backing up, I went to an inpatient facility, mental health facility in Colorado for 48 days. And I was there with other current and former NFL players. And, I heard stories from other players about their experiences with teams when they would talk to these licensed clinicians through the team. And some of that stuff would get back to the coaches. So I think and this is not the case with every team, but, obviously their experiences, are true and valid. But I think having that safe space where it's through the NFLPA, they have no connection to the team except for that they are the representative. So being able to have that specific representative from each team through the NFLPA could be really huge. So a guy could reach out to them and get the help that they need, and also kind of like setting up kind of a mental health protocol. Also that you're thinking about treating like physical injuries and the process that guys go through, whether they go on IR or how they go about just getting treatment for that. I think the mental side of it is, we're lacking on that end, and that's something that can be improved also. So kind of like thinking about setting up a protocol, because every case is different. My case was a little bit more dire. Like I said, I had to go into an inpatient mental health facility for 48 days, and some guys are just dealing with just depression and anxiety on maybe a lower level. So it's not a one size fits all, but it's like getting each guy the care that he needs specific to his needs is really important. And I've also mentioned before, the IR for mental health, because I was put on an NFI list. And, fortunately enough, I was part of an organization where their cause is mental health. And, for each team, it's a little bit different on how they handle things, but I was in a very fortunate situation. And the Colts, they continued to pay me while I was receiving treatment, and, very fortunate in that matter. But, it's not necessary for a team to pay a player when he's on NFI. And that's kind of where I think it would be important that we can create an IR designation for mental health. And obviously, like going through the protocol would help all that out in terms of diagnoses and getting that player what he needs. But I think all these things are important because at the end of the day, the player feels like he's in a safe place, that he's able to talk about what he's got going on, talk about these things, and not worried about what the repercussions might be.
And I really do think that's the key, eliminating the obstacles that would create hesitation for a player who is wrestling with this idea of, do I need help? How do I go about getting it? Instead of getting caught up in a web of anxiety over, well, what's going to happen if the team finds out? What's going to happen if the coach finds out? What happens if I get put on the non-football illness list and they choose not to pay me? And as you said, there are plenty of teams out there that would handle these situations appropriately and admirably, but the fear is legitimate. And if it causes a guy to hesitate at all, these are things that need to be done to break that wall down so anyone who needs help will activate the process without giving a second thought to what the repercussions might be.
Yeah, we just need to eliminate that fear. Obviously, like people are worried about job security because it's like, if I talk about what's going on, maybe I do get the help that I need, but what if down the road, it kind of creates, not really like a blacklisting, but in a sense, like that could create some type of discrimination for the most part, with my standing with the team or a team coming up. So obviously giving that player his privacy, keeping things confidential and giving them the help that they need without having to worry about these types of repercussions, I think is huge.
Okay, so Braden, I see two general prongs that you have here, making it easier and more efficient for players to get help with the assistance of the NFLPA, and then also when a player does need help, creating a separate category of injured reserve that would allow the roster to be handled the right way, the player to be compensated while he gets treated and not have to go on the non-football illness list. How have your efforts to try to force change in both of those ways, how have they been received, and do you anticipate getting to the goal that you've set?
Yeah, I think the ideas have been received really well. And, we talked a lot with the NFLPA when they had you know, the different people that were at the top. Obviously, there's been a lot of changeover. So I think that'll be a very important thing to really revisit, especially this summer, whatever the times are coming up, we can have those conversations again. But I really just think it's up for every player to really just, whether they're going through something, if they're comfortable speaking up about, what things that they've been going through and just making it, showing that vulnerability and just putting their stories out there. I think when you have you're just putting your stories out there, I think that plays a huge part. So, I mean, it's just up to us to continue to talk about, have these conversations, and, that just kind of builds the momentum. The strength in numbers is huge.
And I have so much respect for you talking about this openly. As I mentioned earlier, there was a lengthy story last April or thereabouts in the Indianapolis Star. You've talked about it since then. And for what a maze that a mental health issue can be and how hopeless it can seem, when for you was the moment that you sensed, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to be okay?
Yeah, it was a long process, and honestly, it seemed very long to me, but in respect, it wasn't as long as it could have been. Like, it did feel like I'm never going to get out of this, and it felt like an eternity at the time. But I pretty much tried every avenue. I tried talk therapy. Um, I did different things. I did the inpatient mental health facility that really didn't do a lot to me. Tried different forms of treatments, whether that's through like ketamine therapy, TMS. Um, but obviously, I think a lot of people already know about this that have kind of heard my story. I went to try a different type of treatment, called Ibogaine, and that really helped me out a lot. And, it was kind of one of those things like I've checked every box off and, I needed another option. It's kind of like a last ditch effort for me. And doing that treatment really kind of turned the tide for me and helped me kind of get over that hump, kind of break through the wall, because there was a lot of stuff like, after I did the Ibogaine treatment, then I was actually able to really start applying my therapy OCD specific therapy. And that's where I think was a big thing too, was I wasn't receiving the proper therapy that I needed at the moment. And once I started getting that after the Ibogaine treatment, I really think that's when that started to turn the tide. And, I was able to use the tools and techniques and really start to recover from there.
Well, Braden, I appreciate very much what you're doing, and I am fully on board with helping you any way I can to try to make the process easier on the front end for the players who need help and may be reluctant to seek it. And then on the back end, when there is an issue that needs to be treated and properly handled, that the rosters can be shifted in a way that doesn't create more stress, more anxiety, and more problems for the players. So thank you for opening up, and thank you for all you're doing, and I'll help you any way I can. And, bottom line is we want to help guys. The job is stressful enough, and it may create some of these issues, and we need to have pathways available to help players who need help.
Yeah, appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak. And again, we just need to keep talking about these things. And I think that's what kind of builds that momentum on creating the change that will help a lot of guys out.
Well, thank you, Braden. All the best for the rest of the season. And maybe, just maybe, when NBC is doing the Super Bowl, I don't want you to jinx yourself, but there's a chance we may see you in Santa Clara. That's all I'm saying. I said it, not you. There's a chance. Thanks again, and all the best to you and your family, and enjoy the rest of the season.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.